This Up to Speed podcast is made possible by Legislative Solutions. Legislative Solutions knows New Hampshire's politics inside and out. With years of experience and a results-driven approach, they're the go-to team for anyone looking to make an impact at the State House. Find them at legislative-solutions.com. Welcome to Up to Speed, brought to you by New Hampshire Journal. I am Michael Graham, managing editor at NHJournal.com. This Up to Speed program made possible by good friends at Legislative Solutions. What is Up to Speed? We know you're busy, but we also know that you're interested in what's going on across New Hampshire in every sector, finance, politics, etc. So we bring somebody who really knows what's going on in their corner of this Granite State, and they share with you what you need to know. John Casella knows everything that's going on having to do with waste management systems because he's the CEO and chairman of Casella Waste Systems. Am I getting that right, John?
You got that right, Michael, but I wouldn't go so far as to say that I know everything. There's probably a few things that I can learn every day.
I love that attitude. What I always tell people about these relatively brief 25, 30-minute conversations is every time you go to a party, a backyard barbecue, and you meet someone in a new industry, you're like, I vaguely know what you do. What's really going on? How does that really work? And so that's why I'm glad we have you. So we'll start with that. What's really going on in the world of handling our garbage here in New Hampshire and in some cases across New England?
Sure. It's really a great question, Michael. The reality of the business model over the last 50 years has changed pretty dramatically. So, today we provide collection, transfer stations, recycling components, and disposal facilities to handle the waste that's generated, not only by residential customers, but municipal customers, industrial customers, et cetera. And what's transpired over the last decade in particular is our ability to really look at the waste stream and find a higher and better use for the material that we're taking to ultimate disposal. And in doing so, what we're doing is helping our customers, whether it's a college and university, whether it's a medical center, whether it's a municipality or a corner grocery store, help them meet their sustainability goals by finding a higher and better use for the material that's being discarded. So big changes over the last, decade in particular, probably going on for a long time. But it's a really interesting aspect of the business because for Casella, going back to our roots in 1977, we built the first recycling facility in Vermont. And recycling has always been a major component of our waste management strategy.
Okay, I want to stop you right there before we get too far ahead. And I want to ask you the biggest and smallest question I can ask. The big question is, how prepared is New Hampshire and the region for the needs we're going to have over the next, 25, 30 years? We hope population grows and everybody makes garbage, and it's part of life. You make waste. And then the small question, and I hope you'll start with this one. So I take my bag out to my street thing and I wheel it out there. What happens to all that stuff in my green and blue bins if I live in New Hampshire?
Well, if you live in New Hampshire and you put your waste out at the curb and your recycling out at the curb, it would be picked up and the waste would go to one of three disposal facilities. And the recycling, for the most part, would go to facilities outside the state. So we handle about 25 to 30,000 tons of recyclables in New Hampshire every year. Right. And that those recyclables travel to Charlestown, to our recycling facility in Massachusetts. As I said, the solid waste that's picked up at the curb or at commercial customers or restaurants, colleges and universities, et cetera.
And what happens to what actually happens? You know what I mean? Like the stuff gets dumped out, the big truck. And so what happens to our garbage? Does it get thrown in a hole? Does it get processed, burned? What happens?
Today, from a technology innovation standpoint, landfills today are double-line facilities with leachate collection. They're highly engineered facilities to really protect the environment. And those facilities now have been in place for over 20 years. So there's a lot of knowledge about the engineering. and the facilities themselves. I think probably the biggest thing is there needs to be a recognition that we're always going to need disposal capacity. New Hampshire is no different than other states,
Right.
In terms of needing disposal capacity. No matter how hard we work to find a higher and better use for the materials that are in the waste stream, we're always going to need disposal capacity. And as New Hampshire grows, as you grow, housing, et cetera, population growth, you're going to need to have disposal capacity always in place.
Do we have it?
We don't. I think that there's disposal capacity by the, DES perspective, I think to 2030. I think that there's a clear perspective that more disposal capacity is going to be needed over time. And I think probably most importantly, what people need to understand is you always are going to need disposal capacity for, those natural disasters that, seem to be happening more often, whether it's floods, hurricanes, other damage, in those circumstances, that waste has got to be collected, it's got to be picked up, it's got to be properly disposed of, and done so in a very timely fashion. So we're always going to have a need for disposal capacity, even though, our challenge as a company and the challenge to our people is to find a higher and better use for the material that we're disposing of. And that, as I said, goes back to the roots of the company where, when we first went into a landfill in the mid 70s, there was more cardboard there. We would go in with a load of waste and take a load of cardboard back to the recycling facility. So that's kind of how it all started. And now we're doing things with, colleges and universities, with large industrial customers, helping them meet their sustainability goals, managing the waste and recycling inside those facilities to figure out how we can reduce the amount of waste, increase what's recycled. And so there's a lot of exciting things that are happening now as we move forward and as the industry itself changes.
So one of the things that you hear from people who are concerned about your industry is, New Hampshire is a green state. We're the green, like Vermont's a green mountain state. We're mountainous. We have natural beauty. We want people to come and ski and hike. And it's just not a good fit for your industry that what you do should just ship it to North Dakota. Now, I will tell you, having been to North Dakota, I would tend to agree. I would ship everything to North Dakota because there's nothing there. And there's no reason to go, particularly when I was there in December and it was 20 below zero before wind chill. So yeah, throw all your crap in North Dakota. But why is that not a solution? To simply make New Hampshire a state where we don't store any waste. We just ship it somewhere else.
Well, I think when you think about it from a public policy standpoint, every state should be providing disposal capacity. And that's not necessarily the perspective from a political standpoint.
Right.
It's easier for people to say, well, that's somebody else's problem. Let them take care of it. The reality is that every state's generate waste. They need to have that disposal capacity in the state itself. It doesn't, it's not appropriate from a public policy standpoint to just pass that problem to someone else.
So does New Hampshire have the ability to handle its own waste? Do we have the safe places to put it, the land, and of course the manpower? Well,
and I think the other thing too that is, people say, well, gee, the North Country, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, our facility in Bethlehem has been there for 30 years, and tourism has been fine. There hasn't been major impacts from an economic perspective in a negative fashion at all. So, I think that it's just a misnomer that the facilities themselves can't exist and do so in a manner that doesn't create a problem. That is, in fact, a good neighbor. So I think that there's no question that there's more capacity going to be needed as New Hampshire continues to grow, as other states continue to grow. States need to take the responsibility and put the disposal capacity in place that's necessary. And I think the other thing that is really important as well is it's really becoming a regional market as well, as evidenced by the fact that the recyclables, one of the things that we're looking to do as part of some of the permitting that we're doing is build a recycling facility as part of that in New Hampshire so that the infrastructure for New Hampshire to increase recycling and meet the solid waste goals and plans that are in place can more easily be achieved at a lower cost, as opposed to having to truck,
Right.
all of the recyclables at 25 or 30,000 tons to Massachusetts. So it's an evolving process. There is in fact a regional market. So, but it really is. It comes down to the fact that I think from a public policy standpoint, all states really need to put capacity in place.
So when I was a kid, I knew someone through our church who was involved in the waste management business down in South Carolina. And we drove by a facility of his, and it didn't smell. We were kind of on an odd side of it, more away from commercial business. And the wind came in, and he said, "You smell that?" And I said, "Yes, sir, Mr. Sir. I smell money." And that was and his argument was, look, and he had this little story to tell about how Rome, he argued, was basically invented when the Romans figured out 2,000 years ago how to handle waste, how to move water around, how to move waste. That was the beginning of modernity. That this is throughout human history, dealing with the mess people make and the health risks and whatever. That's been always a challenge. And so he said, so he kind of would I'm doing a public good, but also he said I make a lot of money. And then a few years ago, when China was really involved in the recycling business, I had someone tell me, no, recycling is the money. That's the real money. And now I'm being told that that's all changed, that China is now out of the recycle business. And so I would ask you, if I were totally just a green eye-shade person saying, how can New Hampshire make the most revenue for our state out of the waste business? Would I be talking about waste or recycling, or neither?
I think that it would be both. I think that the reality is we have interstate commerce laws that preclude state from stopping interstate commerce. So, from a practical perspective, you can't stop it. I think that the reality, though, is what we found in the business, and this is most people really don't understand, that there's more free cash flow per ton made from a recycling standpoint than from a disposal perspective. So, to the extent that we don't use disposal capacity this year, it's there to be used next year, and in all likelihood at a higher value than it was this year. So there's no inconsistency with us trying to recycle as much as we possibly can out of the waste stream. Most people really, Michael, don't understand that. The reality is, as I said, it's more beneficial to recycle than it is to simply dispose of material.
Is there a product that if you had the ability to wave a magic wand and have Americans just stop using it because it's such a pain in the neck on the waste end, that you would have us get rid of?
Well, I mean, I think that, there's a huge controversy about PFAS right now that was used by manufacturers, in just about everything that we consume as consumers. And, that material really obviously needs to be taken out of the stream and should not be used from a manufacturing standpoint, as evidenced by all the difficulty that we're having, handling it. It doesn't make sense for us to be putting treatment facilities in at the end of the line. We are doing that now because we have no choice but to try to take the PFAS out of the leachate that goes to municipal sewage treatment facilities. But ultimately, what should happen is that material should be taken out up front. The manufacturers, it should be absolutely, banned, and it should be taken out of the environment completely. It's pretty, evident that that's a really significant problem. And I think that we're going to continue to, emerging contaminants are going to continue to evolve. As you said, we're going to continue to have more knowledge. We're going to continue to learn more about the things that we do as a society. And, that's one that really makes a great deal of sense to take it out up front. Unfortunately, it's going to be around for a long period of time because it's in so many different materials and so many different products that we consume.
And what is
it's also a misnomer too. We're at the end of the stream. We're a passive receiver of PFAS. We don't create PFAS in the landfill. It's in everything that everyone consumes and throws away. But as I said, we're spending millions of dollars putting treatment facilities in place to treat leachate take the PFAS out.
But I can already hear the NIMBY folks saying, and that's why you should not have it here. And you should ship it to North Dakota. Because even if you try to do everything right, there's always risk. And even though you have this new technology with the double linings and you assure, but stuff still goes wrong. I mean, we're reminded of that, every day, that even the most brilliant technology. So what would you say to those people who just say, this is why we want your business to not be in business in New Hampshire?
Well, I think that, the reality is, you're right. Human nature. No one, including ourselves, said that. Right. We're perfect, right? You get everything right every day, and it's a highly regulated industry. There's a lot of activity around the regulations. There's a lot of work, but from a practical standpoint, the technology today is dramatically better than it was 20 years ago. We went from unlined landfills polluting groundwater all around them. And I think that we're, at a much higher level from a technology standpoint at this point in time, and technology will continue to improve. But there are risks that are, associated with society every day that we have to try to minimize. Right. Those risks. We have to try to learn from mistakes and move forward. And I think that, that's all people can ask for.
So I'm going to put you in my time machine and send you back to talk to yourself when you first started. You started that first recycling plant in Vermont back in the Carter administration. What are the one or two things that you would tell? Hey, you're not going to believe this, but when 2025 comes around, we're going to be doing this, or this is going to. What would be the biggest surprise?
I think that probably the biggest surprise is the amount of material that we're able to take out of the waste stream in conjunction with our customer base. I mean, I think the dramatic difference going inside of a college and university, going inside manufacturing facilities, and the work that's being done to change the dynamics of what is discarded and thrown away to the disposal side and moving materials to the recycling processing side is just absolute dramatic change. I think the other thing that is really interesting is technology itself is changing very rapidly. We just did a $20 million upgrade to our facility in Boston, our Charlestown facility. And, every 8 years or so, the equipment wears out. But it is also an appropriate timeline because technology has changed so much. We actually increased the quality of the material by about 35% when we upgraded the facility. And we increased the throughput by about 40%. So, I mean, the technology is changing at a very rapid pace. And I think, from a practical standpoint, the culture is changing as well. It's how do we do these things better? And it's not. And I said, you said it well. We don't do things perfectly. Human error is human error, and judgment is judgment. But you try to do the best you can every day and try not to make the same mistakes.
So obviously there are public policy issues that involve waste management. There's a big debate, obviously, with one of your facilities and the attempts to legislate how your industry works. So I'm going to use that same magic wand I mentioned earlier. You can pass one law that you think would benefit you and your customers the most. What would that law be here at the state level?
Well, I think that we need to put ourselves in a position where we can more easily put capacity in place. I think that the drivers today and the argument for people indicating if we have disposal capacity in place and we're not going to drive the materials management business in a different direction is a real fallacy. I think that states need to take responsibility for the waste that they're generating and not ship it out of state or ship it to other states or try to ship it to someone else. And I think to the extent that we can, make progress there, I think it's going to benefit everyone.
Well, you must remember that famous story from what was like 20 years ago where was it New York and New Jersey had the big ship full of trash and nobody would take it. And I remember thinking at the time that, what the heck, how do you get this far along in the process where you don't know where the stuff is going. And this is, like you said, what happens when you don't have your own plan for your stuff. I want to re-ask a question because you brought up PFAS as a serious health issue, and I get that. But I was asking for more practical. What is something that we use and we throw away that you're thinking to yourself, if you people knew how many hassles you create, either how much of a problem in the stream or how many potential threats, down the, what, obviously PFAS chemicals are important, but like, I assume tin cans are great. You can do a lot with tin cans. I assume glass bottles are great. What's not so great that Granite Staters use regularly?
Well, I mean, I think that there's, when you think about recycling facilities, you think about the materials going through, clearly all of the plastics, the HDPE, PET, all of that material is readily available from a recycling standpoint. I think the other thing, too, is you had mentioned China before. The majority of the material that we're shipping from a recycling standpoint, we handle about 1 million tons a year, is going domestically. We ship some fiber to globally, but the majority.
What do you mean by fiber? What does that mean, fiber?
Fiber is newsprint, corrugated, mixed paper. That's fiber. But the plastics go domestically, and really, really important. I mean, some of the things that are problematic in the recycling stream is plastic bags. They are a real problem because they get hung up in all of the equipment, and you have to shut down and dig the plastic out of the equipment, et cetera. So that's an item that creates a significant amount of difficulty for the recycling equipment.
Well, on behalf of every parent who's had to get a week's worth of groceries up the stairs with 2 kids running around, you can have plastic shopping bags when you pry them from my cold, dead fingers, because they are so helpful. And I get what you're talking about, but man, do they make your life a lot easier particularly for the people who have to chase kids around and pick up after dogs. So that's that.
Very, very true.
Absolutely. Very true. One last question. How did you end up in this business? It's not, I don't know, maybe people wake up and go, one day I'm going to want to waste treatment and recycle biz,
It's a great question. So it was actually my brother that started the business 50 years ago in 1975. And I was at the time working at the Killington ski area in the real estate business. And, one of our first customers from a municipal standpoint was the town of Sherburne, which today is the town of Killington. And then one of our first big commercial customers was Killington ski area, both of which we still have 50 years later, which is quite a feat. Yep. So my brother started the business in 75, and I was helping him with administrative stuff, permits, things of that nature. And then after about a year, he said, you should quit that job and come be my partner. And it took me about a nanosecond to figure that out. And, 50 years later, we're still working together. So we were able to make it as brothers through 50 years of being in business together. So it wasn't all, roses, but we're still friends today. So
I have one sister, and we would kill each other if we worked together for more than half an hour. I think that's it. Well, John Casella, it is great for you to join us here on Up to Speed. Thank you for bringing us up to speed about what's happening in the world of waste management, recycling, et cetera, here in New Hampshire. We really appreciate your time.
Michael, thank you so much for having me. It is a pleasure being with you for the 30 minutes. Thank you.
This Up to Speed podcast is made possible by Legislative Solutions. Legislative Solutions knows New Hampshire's politics inside and out. With years of experience and a results-driven approach, they're the go-to team for anyone looking to make an impact at the State House. Find them at legislative-solutions.com.